Hey everyone, what's up? Welcome to the channel. My name's Heath Home. I'm an Ableton trainer and Point Blank Ibiza music instructor. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to create easy to use, nice, tidy custom Ableton drum racks. So yeah, let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is head over to my Ableton browser and click underneath the title categories, drums. By default, at the top of this section on the right is an empty drum rack, and I'm going to click on that with the mouse and just simply drag it over here to an empty MIDI track and let it go, drop it onto that channel. And I'm now going to come over to the Ableton browser again, and I'm going to go into the section places, and in my case I have a folder titled sample library here. I'm going to click on that folder, and I'm going to look in here for an example of a sample pack containing drum hits that I'd really like to use inside my own custom drum rack. I'm going to pick on this Toolroom Academy Essential Techno pack. So I'm going to click on the arrow to the left here to open it up, and you'll see inside of there typically what comes inside a sample pack: a list of folders containing loops and in some cases individual drum hits. It's the individual drum hits I'm looking for, and in this case they're here in this folder called single hits. So I'm going to click on the left here on the arrow to open that up. I'm also just going to click back on my drum rack track to open up the drum rack at the bottom so I can see it. And I'm now going to pick on the kick folder to begin with. So I'm going to click on the arrow on the left hand side here to open that up. I'm going to click on the first sample. Actually, just before I do that, just check my preview volume isn't too loud. Click on this top sample here. I'm going to come to my keyboard, I'm going to hold down shift, and I'm going to come all the way down and click the bottom sample here, and now I've selected all of those kicks together. The next step is a bit of an essential one to make this work. I need to hold down command on my keyboard, and while I'm holding down command I can now click with the mouse on top of all these samples together, select them, drag them down here over to the side of the drum rack where the grid is, and I can scroll up and down on this side here, and I'm looking for this pad C1. Now I've found the pad already, so I'm going to come over the top of that with the mouse and let go of the mouse over the top of that pad C1. That's now opened up this section here, and it's put all of those Toolroom techno kicks onto this one pad inside of the drum rack. So now what we're going to do is a few steps over here to the right. I'm going to click this little box here with the arrow. I'm going to click the top sample, techno kick sample here, and I'm going to go to my keyboard and click Command A to select all of the samples here. I'm going to right click the mouse here, and I'm going to choose red. That's going to be the color theme of my kicks inside of this rack. I'm now going to come over and click this little box called Chain. That opens up this window here, and I'm now going to mouse over the top of these little columns here on the left, these blue columns, and when I see the symbol change to that shape there, I'm going to click the mouse down, hold it, and drag these columns all the way out to the right. Once that's done, I'm going to right click in this darker grey section here and choose distribute ranges equally. And I'm now going to mouse over the top of this little blue line, light blue line here, right click the mouse and map that to macro 1. Now with this macro 1 over here, we're just going to do a little bit of tidying up. We're going to click on that macro, Command R to name it. I'm going to call it kick. I'm also going to click on the rack itself up the top here and Command R and also name that kick. Now I'm going to just come back onto the macro here, and I'm going to right click the mouse on top of it and choose the red color theme. I'll slide my rack over a little bit so I can see this section here, and I'm now going to right click on top of this kick macro here and map it to macro 1, and that's macro 1 of the drum rack over here to the left. So I'm going to click that, and I now have this macro over here called kick inside of the drum rack itself. I'm just going to right click on top of that and choose the color red. So now it's a little bit of a process of repeating these steps. I'm going to come back up to the Toolroom folder, and I'm now going to choose the claps and snare folder. Left click left click on the arrow here to open that up. I'm going to click on the top sample. I'm going to hold down shift and click on the bottom sample to select them all together. I'm going to hold down that little essential key now, which is the command key on the keyboard. Click, hold, and drag them all across here to C#1 alongside of the kick, and then let it go. Once that's copied across, I'm going to come over here to the right, click this little arrow here, click on the top clap and snare sample, Command A to select all of the samples here together, right click the mouse, and I'm going to choose green. That's the theme of my clap and snares. I'm now going to hit this little chain box here. which opens up again this section here. I'm going to come to these little blue columns here, mouse over them till I get that symbol change, and I'm now going to click and drag all of them all the way across to the right. I'm going to right click the mouse in this darker grey section here, choose distribute ranges equally. I'm then going to right click the mouse on this little blue line over here and map that to macro 1. And now we're just going to do a little bit of admin in here. We're going to click on the macro 1, Command R to name it. I'm just going to call it simply claps. Click on the title, the rack title itself, Command R to name that as well. I'm going to call that also claps. Right clicking back on the macro itself to choose the nice green color. Slide this across, and I'm now going to right click on this macro again and map that to macro 2. And once again over here, once it's inside of the drum rack itself, right clicking on top of there and choosing the green color. Alright, so now I'm going to follow that process through. The next thing I'm going to choose is the hats and rides folder. I'm going to click on the first ride, hold down shift, click on the bottom ride or hat. I'm now going to hold down command, and I'm going to click with the mouse and drag that across onto this empty pad here called D1 and let that go. Once that's copied across, I'm going to follow these steps here. I'm going to click this little arrow here, click the top sample, Command A to select them all together, right click the mouse to choose a color scheme. Yellow is my default for hats and rides. I'm going to click on this little chain box here, mousing over the top of these columns until I have that symbol, click, hold and drag all the way to the right. Right click my mouse inside that section above, choose distribute ranges equally. Then I'm going to right click on this little blue line here, map to macro 1, and we're now going to do our little admin again in here. I'm going to click on that macro, Command R, name it hats, click on the title, Command R, name it hats, click back on the macro itself, right click it, choose the same matching color, slide this over, and now I'm going to right click on that macro again and now map it to macro 3 of the drum rack itself. Click on top of that macro and choose yellow from the color scheme, so hats are now in place. So to keep this video short, I'm probably not going to use all of these folders, but I will add the stabs in as well for the purpose of this tutorial. I'm going to click on the top sample, hold down shift and click on the bottom sample, command, hold down command on the keyboard, and now mouse, click and drag to this D# 1 pad, let it go. Wait for those to copy across. Once they're copied, I'm going to follow this procedure. I'm going to click on this little arrow box, click on the top sample, Command A to select them all, right click the mouse to choose the color. In this case, it's going to be blue. Click on this little chain box to open up this section here, mouse over to get the symbol chain, click, hold and drag all the way to the right, right click the mouse above it to distribute ranges equally, right click on top of this little blue line here and map that to macro 1. And now we're going to do some naming, so I'm just going to click on this macro 1, Command R, these are the stabs, title it up, click on the title at the top here, Command R, name that also stabs, right click on top of the macro, choose the color scheme which is blue, slide this over, right click on the macro again and now map it to macro 4 of the main drum rack. Click on top of here, right click on top of there, choose the same matching color scheme. So as I said, for the purpose of keeping this video short, I'm just going to leave it as those 4 samples as my selection. But as you can see, if we came back to the single hits folder, I could also add in toms and atmospheric hits as well, which would make it a more complete drum rack. And now what I'm going to do is put together a little beat to demonstrate how handy this custom Ableton drum rack is going to be. So I'm going to click on this little circle here to just tidy it up a bit. That will close down this section of the rack. And we're now just looking at the rack in a much more sort of compact fashion. I'm going to come up to my MIDI track with the drum rack on it, and I'm going to come to an empty clip slot here at the top, and I'm going to double click to create myself a MIDI clip. Double click with the mouse. There I have a 1 bar by default MIDI clip with my samples here on the left. I'm going to just head into this box here and just scroll up with the mouse to the number 2. So I've actually got myself a little bit more real estate to create a pattern. So now I have 2 bars, and I'm now going to use the mouse and the pencil tool to put in a simple pattern. I'm just going to turn, well, obviously with the headphone icon here, this blue headphone icon, you can hear the previews of the sounds. And I'm going to just put in a fairly standard simple kick drum pattern on the strong beats. We're in 4/4, so 1 on the 1, the 2, the 3 and the 4. Once I have those beats drawn in with the mouse, I'm just going to drag through with the mouse like that to select them all inside the boundaries between the 1 and the 2. Command D just to duplicate that across. And I'm now going to use a little workflow. Well, this is a little tip that I use an awful lot. I have this pattern drawn in. Instead of having to draw in every single note that I want to do, I'm going to use these as a starting point. So if I click to the left here, I can select all of those kicks together. I'm now going to hold down Alt Option key on my keyboard, and I can now actually drag a copy of those up into the hat track in the position of where I want the hats to be in this drum pattern. I'm now also going to do something similar with the claps and snares. I'm just going to pick on this first hat here, hold down Alt Option key, and just slide myself across a hat and a snare. Sorry, a clap and a snare. I'm also going to do the same for I'm going to put the accents on the 2 and the 4, so I'm also going to do the same for the 4. Hold down Alt Option and just slide myself across a note. I'm now going to drag the mouse through those inside the 1 and the 2, bar 1 and 2. And Command D to duplicate that across. Now I'm going to play this little drum groove and just have a listen, and so I can hear where I want to put in my stab sounds. So I'm thinking maybe one here, maybe one here. And a couple down the end here as well, I think. Nice. So there's a simple, really simple, just non-complicated little drum groove with some stabs. Now what we want to do is now look at the benefits of having this custom rack and what we can now do. So I'm just going to click to show you guys again the rack itself. Now remembering that all of these samples are nicely labeled and they have a macro underneath them. Now what that means is if you have a push or a MIDI controller, you can map all of these macros here, these parameters, to a knob on a MIDI controller, and now be able to cycle through all the samples of each of those pads. So what that means is, let's go through this. I'm going to just come back to my MIDI clip for a second, and I'm going to Command A and select all of the notes I've programmed in there, and I'm going to use a 0 for a second to mute them all, and then going to click the left here just to have the kicks highlighted, and then 0 again, excuse me, to bring them back into action. I'm now going to open up the drum rack so you can see this section here, and I'm going to start that drum groove playing again. And as it's playing now, in my case I have a push 2 connected here. I can now come to the first macro that matches the kick macro inside the drum rack and start turning it, and I'll hear the change as it cycles through all the kick samples I have in here. So I can, for example, choose that as for the moment as the kick, and I'm now going to come up here and do the same for the clap. I'm going to unmute the clap, so select the claps, 0 to unmute, back over to the drum rack, and I'm now going to cycle through with the macro. Yeah, I like that. So obviously I'm going to choose that one there. I'm going to come back to my MIDI clip and now unmute the hat track, the hat part of this clip. So remembering it's hats and rides, that's obviously a ride. I'm now going to come down to the macro for the hats and cycle through that. It's quite a nice techno ride just straight off the bat there. Back up to the MIDI clip, and I'm now going to unmute the stabs as well. So 0 to do that. Over to the macro to cycle through, hear what we have. That's pretty cool, but let's listen to what else is here. Let's go back a little bit. Yeah, so hopefully you can see, guys, how quick that is to be able to cycle through all those samples inside of that drum rack. And obviously I can put together something quite fast and then at a later point go a little bit more in depth about which sound I want to use in relation to, with those macros in relation to the MIDI I've programmed in. So we now have this beat up here. And what I would do next is just a quick little bit of mixing. So I'm just going to open up the drum rack here, just bring the pads down and bring them back up again. All the rides are a little bit dominant. Check my stab volume as well. Also the claps. And there you have it, a really nice simple beat with all this flexibility of being able to use the macros to scroll through all the different samples, and remembering, as I said, if I had made a complete drum rack here of all the Toolroom single hits, we would have had toms and atmosphere hits as well to add into the mix. Now what I'm going to do is just click on this drum rack at the title here, Command R, and I'm actually going to name it the Toolroom Techno Drum Rack. You can use whatever lingo you want. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to save that so I can reuse this as many times as I like in future projects. And the way to do that is just coming into the Ableton browser. I'm going to come across to the Places section again, and I'm going to choose the user library from the titles there. Maybe you might have already a folder here, but if you don't, pretty simple process. Once this user library section opens up, right click the mouse there and choose new folder. I'm going to choose a new folder. I'm going to name it Drum Racks. And now what I'm going to do is come back to this drum rack I've now created and just simply drag that over into that new folder. And there you have it, ladies and gents, that's now copied in there, and in the future I will have this really nice, neat, easy, user-friendly Toolroom Techno drum rack that I can use inside of future projects. So pretty much that's a wrap for today. If you've enjoyed this video, found it helpful, please give it a thumbs up, and if you're new here to this channel, make sure to smash the bell and subscribe for more future videos all around music, electronic music production using Ableton Live. Also, any comments and suggestions for future Ableton tutorials are welcome, and that's it from me. Peace out, guys.